Sonic remakes are such a weird realm of games to explore. Some of these versions feel very similar to their HD counterparts, and others are entirely brand new games that just have similar theming. But one thing that almost every Sonic remake has in common is that the soundtrack is very different in comparison to its HD counterpart. And really, I think a lot of these soundtracks are very underappreciated, and so today, I want to go through all of the Sonic remakes that have different soundtracks and just talk about my thoughts on them. So without any further ado, let's get on into it. The first game to talk about is, I'm sure you're not surprised, Sonic 1 8-bit. And boy, this is a strong start. This soundtrack is so good that I kid you not, I think Labyrinth Zone and Scrap Brain Zone from this version of the game, I think these songs are better than their 16-bit counterparts, respectively. And as you can tell, they're not just ports to an 8-bit, I mean, they're completely original songs. Another amazing track is Sky Bass Zone. This song is so tense, although it may be very short and it's just a, it's a pretty short loop, I still think it's very, intimidating somehow. They really were able to make such a great soundtrack even with the limiting hardware. And so to keep the ball rolling, we have, well, Sonic 2's 8-bit adaptation. And honestly, this one is kind of mid. There's really not a single song I really like from this version. Underground Zone is pretty good. I like the rhythm there. I think there's some cool melody moments as well, but it's just kind of okay as a soundtrack overall. I can't really think of anything too memorable. Going through the Sonic 1 OST, I was like, whoa, that's cool. And another one was like, yo, that's awesome. But this one I was like, I don't know. I really don't know what to say. And really, I think the reason that these tracks may not be memorable is because the only thing you'll remember about this game is that if you played it on the Game Gear, this first boss is literally it's basically impossible, bro. How do you do this? Next up is Sonic Spinball 8-bit. Now, this game may be utterly atrocious. Its soundtrack isn't that bad. The title screen theme is a decent recreation of the one on the Genesis, but every other song is just, completely different. I will say, I do think The Machine is a very good track. Definitely stands out in comparison to the rest of the soundtrack. And so, while we've had two soundtracks that aren't too good, this next one is actually not half bad at all. Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis GBA. Okay, now this game may be some garbage, but this Game Boy port of all the Sonic 1 songs sounds pretty good. I am a huge fan of Marble Zone's theme in this version, when I normally don't like Marble Zone much at all. I think the softer instruments used here just sound better. On the Genesis, it felt a little bit more abrasive, which just didn't fit the track that well in my opinion. Starlight Zone is another really good one as well. The samples are a little bit crappy sounding, so you get a lot of noise distortion, but genuinely, if these samples were just cleaned up, man, it would be such a good track, man. But it feels like it's right there, but it's still a little bit annoying to listen to because of how the samples sound. So while I despise this game because it's hot garbage, I still must say, these ports of these songs are actually quite good. I really don't have many problems with them. I think they pick some pretty darn good samples that just sound nice. So I have to give credit where credit is due. This is some solid stuff. And let me tell you, things keep going up from here because Sonic Colors on the DS. Why is it so good? I don't know what they were on when they were making this, but boy, these like bit crunched versions of the HD soundtrack, which Colors already has a legendary soundtrack. Oh, it's so good. Oh my gosh. But just taking that and giving it like funky samples, bro, like I'm ascending. And where else to start other than Tropical Resort? This is a great adaptation. I just love the sample usage here, like the sounds they picked to represent all the instruments apart from like the specific ones for each track are just amazing. And out of all the Tropical Resort tracks, this for sure has to be my favorite. Act 1 is just so good. When I was going through this soundtrack, I will say I was a little worried about how Sweet Mountain was going to sound, because it was like, it uses a lot of samples, but like, how are they going to get samples that high quality to be on the DS? Like, how is that going to sound? And oh my gosh, they blew my expectations out of the water again. Like, dude, the way the brass sample cuts off a little early, I know that's probably a technical limitation, but that just adds a whole other layer of rhythm to this track. Planet Wisp is also shockingly good. I was also worried about this one because it's like, well, pianos, you know, string instruments, like how are they going to handle this? I will say the piano isn't very good, but I don't really know how they could have made it better, but once all the instruments come in, it gets real good. Now, that's all the stage songs, but there is one track I have to talk about, and that is Negative Wisp Armor Phase 2, and I am not saying that. I don't know how they made an orchestral track sound goated on the DS. Like, how do you do this? Just everything about this. Oh, it just comes together perfectly. And hot take, I might genuinely like this more than the HD version. I don't know how they did that, but like, it's so good. It's like almost perfect, man. Like, and just saying all that, I could go on and on about how goated this version of Colors' soundtrack is. But today is not the day I get to gush about this game. We got some other games to talk about. Next up on the list is Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, again on the DS. This one is a little weird because a lot of these songs aren't really that notable, but the ones that are notable are very notable. So since this is a racing game, it doesn't really have much of its own soundtrack, it just really copies themes from other games, which is totally fine, and in this case, actually is to its benefit, because now I can totally hear Emerald Coast on the DS. Like, dude, that's so cool to me. Like, even though this isn't as good as the original, of course, but it's still just awesome to see this kind of stuff. It's like we're able to get official versions of blank Sonic song, Sega Genesis remix, you know what I mean? Like, well, I'll genuinely look that type of stuff up, and we get a little taste of that with this. While it may not be Sega Genesis instruments, it's the DS, which I think is debatably better because now you have samples that the developers get to pick out for it. It's really cool. Now, before I move on, I do have two more songs I'd like to comment on. The first of which being Resort Island. Yes, they actually did make a Can You Feel the Sunshine remix, and it's official for the DS. And it sounds absolutely legendary. It's just as good as you'd think it'd be. Gosh dang it, man, I love this song, bro. Now, the final song I'd like to mention is this game's title theme. Man, I don't know, this song just goes crazy hard. I don't know what it is about it. They just really cooked with this one, honestly. Now, this next one I would like to clarify is definitely a stretch. It doesn't really count as a demake, but it's in that same vein of same game, but on a different platform with a different soundtrack, but it's not truly a demake, it's just the same game. But I had to talk about this because this stuff is so interesting to me, man. And that is Sonic 4 Episode 1. As most people know, this game was available on all the major consoles at that time and mobile. But there's one console that I didn't know this game was on for the longest time, and that is the Wii. Yeah, this game had a WiiWare port, and I had never heard of that for the longest time. But what's so weird about this Wii version is that, while it may be the same game, the soundtrack is a good bit different. Most all of the songs are just the same composition, but different instrumentation. Yeah, it's still Sonic 4 music, but I think a lot of these synths that are still fundamentally Sonic 4 sounding, they sound a lot less aggressive. Like, take the final boss theme, for example. Here's that song on the Wii. And here's this song on every other version of the game. Yeah, they're definitely the same song, but still, the Wii version sounds much better in my opinion. It's like I mentioned, less aggressive. But that's not all. The mobile port for this game also has one song that's different. The only notable one that I really want to point out here is Casino Street Act 2. The mobile version of this song is completely different. And honestly, I'm quite a fan of it. I think this is a pretty solid track. But what's also weird is that the Wii version, this song specifically sounds the most different out of all the other songs on the Wii. I don't know what's up with Casino Street Act 2, bruh. This is the weirdest zone ever. Not only is the level weird, but the soundtrack, we now have 3 separate versions of this song that are quite different. One being an entirely different song and the other one sounding quite different with the instrumentation. So yeah, that really ends my discussion on Sonic 4. I know this was definitely a stretch and it didn't really count, but I thought I had to bring it up because it's still really interesting stuff. Now on to Sonic Generations on the 3DS. We've now entered such a weird area right now because, yes, this is 100% still just a demake, but now this is on the 3DS, which means it can play full-blown audio files for the entire soundtrack. That is now something that's actually feasible. And so since the 3DS can now just play all the songs, you'd think, well, it's going to be the same, but of course, Generations is a special little exception. Generations on the 3DS has entirely different stages in comparison to the HD version. And so, we get more banger remixes that were for the 3DS. Like, oh my gosh. Now, of course, the first song that comes to mind when everyone thinks of this version of the game is Big Arm, and for good reason. This song is insanely good. Like, oh my gosh. Oh. I don't even got words, man. This song is so good. Another song that I really do like is Radical Highway for Classic Sonic. And although modern Sonic's version of the same stage is fatally damaging to your eardrums, Classic Sonic's version is a banger, honestly. I like this one. The added percussion and just stronger drums really just drives the song forward. I'm also a big fan of the bass added here. It just gives it some grit, which was definitely not what the original was going for, but I think just overall makes it sound better. Modern Sonic's remix for Tropical Resort is also pretty good. They basically just took the song, made it faster, and that's kind of it. It's just kind of a re-recording of the same song from Colors, but it's just a little faster, but the one from Colors is great, so the song is also not bad at all. So saying all of that, we now only have one more game to talk about, and that is Sonic Lost World. While 99% of the tracks in this version are just the exact same from the Wii U version, there is one song I do want to talk about that is just completely original for this version, and that is the special stage theme, since the Wii U version didn't have a special stage of any kind. And I don't know, man, this song is just so weird sounding. They applied a crap ton of detune to all the instruments that just give it such a weird, like, alien feeling, which I guess does work for a special stage where you're just flying around in the void, so, I mean, heck, it fits, so there you go. Sonic remakes are just cool, man. Getting to see Sonic games transformed into a completely different game, it's just a different take on the same game, and you can see that through the gameplay, and as I've tried to point out today, through the soundtracks. Now in remakes, the soundtrack is usually the most consistent part, but just hearing this on different hardware, or these songs just being completely original, it's just nice to see. So I'm not gonna yap on anymore. I've said all there really is to be said, so I do hope this video caught you well, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.